Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ed Army, and today we are talking about Pure K9, as this will be the focus of this actual video, instead of just talking about any of the K9 variants. Now, I do want to bring up that Justice Hunters has just released in the last week, so I'm getting this to you, I think about, by the time we're recording, it will be about 2 weeks since Justice Hunters has been released because of just time I've been having. But the point is, I want to talk about the actual deck in terms of Pure K9 because I think this is a deck that a lot of people are just going to overlook in terms of its variant ability and then not play its pure version. But the pure version actually has a lot of gas and can actually catch a lot of people off guard because its plays are very much different than just the engine aspect of K9. So yes, I did mention in one of my videos. You should go check it out and you would enjoy the engine access of K9. But we're talking about the K9 as a deck, and we're going to be talking about it in its pure form. So the reason I tried out Pure K9 first is that after I opened up some boxes of Justice Hunters with my friends, I was always aiming to get K9. I wanted to play it ever since I saw the Crystron version, and I was like, oh, I want to play this deck. So I thought it was really cool. I like the rank 5 Xyz. It's very simple mechanic-wise, but it's also very important to understand how you play a deck and kind of the matching playstyle you want to give it. And I think this deck matches my playstyle pretty well. The cards simply have one to two intuitive effects. So in this case, what I mean by this, to break it down to people, if this helps out for beginners or people who are just starting to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or has been a while, I say intuitive effects as the cards are just simply, they read as they say. So like on many of the main deck monsters outside of Lupus, they read if your opponent has 2 or more cards in their hand, you can normal summon this card without tributing. That is extremely intuitive. It just says, hey, if you see 2 cards in their hand, you can normal summon it. Very easy to understand. Additionally, they all have proccing effects, which allow them to either add cards from the deck to the hand, whether it is Lantern or Jokul, both respectively, adding either monsters that are not of their type or specifically adding spells and traps of the K9 archetype. Then Izuna and Lupus are the earth monsters of this group, but more importantly, Lupus is the one that can either summon itself, very much like a hand trap in the case of Izuna, but it can be either from in the graveyard and or in the hand if your opponent has activated a monster effect of this turn, whether it's in the hand or the graveyard. And Izuna has the very same condition, so these cards are very intuitive. You understand your opponent has to do something in order for you to actually get these things on the field. Additionally, they have their own effects. Izuna lets you dump any K9 card from the deck to the graveyard, and Lupus allows you to quick Xyz and offers an Xyz monster the ability that, while it has Lupus as a material, it cannot be targeted. So the point I'm getting across here is that the entire K9 roster of monsters are extremely simple to understand. For the most part, they don't actually have anything too complicated. I think the most difficult thing among the archetype might be with like Lantern and making sure you target a correct non-pyro monster in the graveyard. Otherwise, everything else in the archetype in terms of the monsters, main deck monsters, are very simple to understand. So I think that's one of the best reasons. Additionally, the spells and traps are very simple. Pretty much we're only talking about the one spell that we will be searching. There are a trap, but we don't really use EW, experimental liberation or experimental release, I think is what it's called. We don't just use that card because if it summoned from the deck, it probably would be a lot better, but it doesn't. Point is, we do have the liberation spells, which are quick play, effectively rank ups, but we have Case of K9, which is your searcher. It is your continuous spell. It has the ability to buff all of your K9 monsters by 900 attack if your opponent had activated a monster effect during that turn, which also means during their turn, when they have their battle phase, and your turn during your battle phase. Very important. Trust me, it does come up. Additionally, you search for any K9 monster when you activate it, and pretty much when this card is destroyed and leaves the spell and trap card zone, you are able to set any of your quick play rank up effectively, or the liberation spells, or also known as the release cards here in the TCG. Very simple. Like I said, this deck is, in my opinion, it follows a method that I use a lot when I make videos, but also when I'm doing activities, which is the KISS method, which is keep it simple, stupid. It's very important for people who maybe, the joke about Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, in reading, it's more or less, I think, decks are too complicated sometimes for certain players. They can't keep up. Pure K9 is one of these decks where I think it is definitely designed for people who want to be more intuitive with their deck. So the deck actually kind of leads you in the right direction, so it's a lot easier for you to pilot the deck after you start to play with it a bit. It's not super complicated. Additionally, we have our release cards, which are the rank up spells. They are important. Like I said, I've gone over this in the engine access, but it's really important for me to break it down here because Pure runs all of the cards outside of EW Liberation, and yes, you do use all of them. I've seen a lot of decks run larger engines of K9, but personally, if your deck does not have a lot of level 5s, I highly do not recommend you running the engine as an additional outside of maybe the Izunas and the Lupus and the Ripper and the Extra. just off the basis that too many of the K9 cards, if they're the only level 5s in your deck that can actually supply your deck a lot more drive or play starters, I highly recommend you don't do it, because you can brick on the Azunas actually, and they don't do anything in the engine version decks, just because after they dump the Lupus and you make a Ripper, or if it gets banished, yeah, you're kind of out of options, so a bigger engine really has to depend. But in Pure, you use all of them. LC Liberation allows you to target a rank 5 specifically, that is non a K9 or a K9 monster or Xyz monster, and then you can basically rank up into a different named one. A very important thing to remember with the Liberation cards is that they specifically say a different named K9 monster, so this does include your rank 5s and your rank 9 that can go interchangeably. This is important because a lot of people are misunderstanding that when you use the Liberation spells, they are specifically ranking up into Werewolf, X-Werewolf, but they're forgetting that you can go into Hound, or if you're in X-Werewolf or Hound, you can immediately Xyz back into Ripper. It does say specifically a different name, which is very important because a lot of people are making that misplay. They're going to X-Werewolf. They completely do not need to do that immediately, because you don't need to bring out X-Werewolf unless you need to. X-Werewolf is extremely good, and in Pure it is basically one of your alternate win conditions as well. However, if someone has talents and you go for X-Werewolf and you use a monster effect, they will take it and they will just OTK you. That is an important thing, so do keep that in mind. Or put it in defense when you summon it if it's your opponent's turn. Just please, I promise you, do that. You don't want to give them a werewolf and then it will attack you back and its effects will be insane. Point I'm trying to get across here, you do have to understand the very big importance of the Liberation cards. The point is the Forced Liberation, which is LC, or the Forced Release, is the one that allows you to do it during your main phase. It gives you the additional pop when you go into your other Xyz. LC Liberation allows you to do it, but it is also very important that you understand this is how you OTK in this deck. This deck does allow you to OTK pretty easy. It's one of these decks that sneakingly has an OTK engine built into it, but a lot of people probably have ignored that in Pure because they don't really see it, but it can totally happen. And this deck can go second and pretty much wipe out an opponent if they're not prepared. The main thing I want to talk about is the fact that having LC Liberation is an OTK enabler, because if you can get your attacks in and you have any of the K9 Xyz in rotation, you can immediately turn it into an X-Werewolf. As long as it has 2 to 3 materials, that werewolf will be able to attack 3 times. 3 times, 3,300. If you have the actual case of K9 up, it'll be 42. So you do the math, 3 times, you're already past 8K, they're done. So that's a really important factor I want to draw in here with Pure K9, is that it has a very strong win condition built into it in X-Werewolf if you can attack people. But that's kind of the key thing. You really want to get this set up right. So I know I've kind of covered the cards, and pretty much I'm not going to go over the extra deck because Pure K9, you just pretty much use those monsters on top of any rank 5 Xyz engine you want. You can run things like Zeus, you can run Typhon, you can run any links if you really feel like you need to, but pretty much it's almost all Xyz. And yeah, funny enough, this deck does get hurt a lot by something like Dimensional Barrier. However, you can get around that with Lupus, because Lupus will allow you to Xyz. And in Pure, if you have a large engine of Xyz monsters, you don't actually feel that bad because of the Liberation spells. If you can set any of them, you at least have ways to play around some of your opponent's board. And like I said, Forced Release is really good because it allows you to pop cards, and then LC Liberation is really good in the battle phase because you can bring out Werewolf. Your opponent might not be able to get over 3,300 attack, and that is a lot to deal with, so it can catch people off guard. And it is one of the very few decks, I think, that can actually deal with something like the Lunalite Liger Dancer, because it can get to a high enough attack threshold to survive those very important attacks, because I think Liger Dancer is like 3,800 attack. You can get Werewolf to 42, and if you can protect Werewolf and get Werewolf into a position where it can actually run them over, it can be completely in your favor to do that. The importance, too, of the extra deck is that K9 can rely on its own extra deck. You burn through your Xyz extremely quickly in Pure because of the Liberation spells, importance of just kind of going through them all. The key factor, too, is you have recyclability built into all of the Liberation spells. So extremely important. Additionally, you have the ability to get them into rotation multiple times. But the key thing is, the extra deck, the main deck, all of it works very synergistically. And the crazy thing is, because of how the deck is designed, everything out of the box is ready to go. Pretty much you have everything you need. If you get all your Azunas, everything, you can double up on Lupus if you want. You can play one. I personally say if you're going to play Pure, you have to play two. It is just so much better because in Pure, Lupus really does reach its full capacity. And the main reason is for this specific situation. When you use Lupus, the problem usually stems in the other decks is that once you drop the Azuna and send the Lupus, that Lupus is a target. It has a target on its back. The problem is you have no other way to really utilize it in the engine decks unless you're running a large engine of K9. If most of these decks just want to run Azuna as a 3 of with the one Lupus, this is your only way to actually use Lupus properly to get those XCs going for Ripper. However, if you're playing it in Pure specifically, the benefit and the strength you get out of Lupus is that Lupus is also a hand trap, so you don't mind if it's in your hand. But the key thing is you can use Lupus's effect in different ways than you normally would. Now, what I mean by this isn't that you change up what it does. What it actually can do is that you can use it in different sequences. The reason this is so big is that Lupus can actually be used multiple times as multiple different material to allow different Xyz monsters to have targeting protection for specific interactions, and then also be able to Xyz and summon itself later on in any combo. Now, the reason this takes place is simple. If you're running Jokul, if you're running Lantern, you can bring back your Lupus and have it rotate multiple times. Now, the way you actually do this is by sequencing in different ways, but the key thing is once a Lupus is in rotation, if you have access to Lantern, Lantern can bring it back. If you have it in your hand, guess what? If you have Jokul, Jokul can bring it to the field. You have so many different options to actually get the Lupus onto the field that it doesn't have to use its own effect to summon itself. It can, but you don't actually have to. And this is actually why I think the strength of it really comes into play in Pure. Because you don't mind it in your hand, a lot of times people will hand trap you. And when they do, the advantage is DD Crow, things that activate to stop cards in graveyard, they are now offline. So unless your opponent has some type of way to stop that Lupus on field when you summon it from your hand, it actually kind of gets away with being a hand trap in your specific deck, because only in Pure K9 this situation is actually beneficial, whereas in some of the other decks it's more situational if Azuna is already on the field or you have a random level 5 that you can tag Xyz with. Now, like I said, I'm also gassing up Pure. I've played it, I've liked it, I see it's really good. I've been giving it more testing, I still need to test it more. But the reason I wanted to talk about Pure and kind of give it this example and explanation and kind of like this little bit of glazing so people can understand how good it is that I think with the Justice Hunters decks and kind of how Yu-Gi-Oh's been for a bit, it's a really good breath of fresh air for people to try. And I do believe that it is in your best interest if you have been feeling like playing the game or you just want to get back into it. This is actually a good format for it. Now, I will say, if you don't like hand traps back and forthing, you're going to have to get used to it a bit. This format is heavily based, I think, on interaction, and a lot of the decks do the interactions heavy. Now, I do need to have my matchup against Vanquished Soul K9 versus Pure to see how it goes. But one thing I do like is that it feels less, I think, oppressive. Because of how K9 functions, it can play on the opponent's turn. So it is kind of funny that if you're playing against Vanquished Soul, they're used to playing on both turns. You also can play on both turns if you're playing a Pure K9 deck. And the best part I did want to mention too is that if you do like hand traps, you can play a ton of non-engine. This is the most non-engine I've ever put into a single deck, and so far it's been doing me pretty well. I've never actually run a deck with 20 hand traps consisting of almost the entire strategy. I've just never done it because I thought it was ridiculous. However, this is the first time I've tried it. This deck and all the Justice Hunters decks are kind of designed to work with a lot of non-engine hand traps, whatever you want, and I'm actually very happy with it. I am working on a sideboard. I haven't done a full sideboard yet, just kind of getting the gist of what the deck wants to do, because I think going first and second so far, this deck has really performed extremely well for what I was expecting outside of the gate, off rip, playing against a lot of these decks. There's just a lot I couldn't have imagined that the deck could do, and that's mostly based on the fact that the strategy is just very strong. So if I had to leave you anything with the point of this video and just kind of getting over the fact of Pure K9, why it's so crazy, as I put, is like, it's just super consistent. It works really well with its engine. It can be an engine deck too if you completely want to just switch over to any variant deck. You can, if you get 3 Azunas and 1 Lupus, remember, you can just shove it in anything. You just need a Ripper, and you're good to go. Remember, you also can Xyz for something that isn't Ripper, by the way. So sometimes people don't, I had a conversation with this with a friend, is that the point of Lupus being broken is that you can just go into any archetypal rank 5. So there are some options. Also, Typhon against your opponent is kind of hilarious on their turn if you can get the Lupus in the right position, because once you bring the Lupus to the field, there are a lot of cards that get shut out, and the fact that the actual Typhon does not have or has protection and targeting, but also is a floodgate, a lot of 3k over monsters on your opponent's first turn can't get rid of it. So something like a Dragoon, if it's made with like an actual material, even so, it just can't deal with the actual Typhon, because Typhon has 1 targeting protection, but 2, that Dragoon will not be able to activate its effects, because Typhon does not activate its effect when it hits the field. So I did want to bring that up as one of my, because one of my jokes, since I was playing Crystron for the last format, was that every time I tried to play the deck, I literally never got to synchro, because people just stopped me, because it felt like the format was so unfair. So my only real boss monster was Typhon. He came out all the time. And now my real boss monster is in K9, which is hilarious. But it's an inside joke. You wouldn't get it. But yeah, he's the boss monster. He gets it done. Typhon shuts things down, and he'll save you. He'll bounce stuff. But I did want to finish by just saying Pure K9 is a lot of fun. And if you do like Yu-Gi-Oh! At the moment, and you're willing to try it, and you just want to get something, a little breath of fresh air, I think Justice Hunters is the set for you. But also, I think Pure K9 is a deck that if you want to begin and just practice the game, it is actually a very intuitive, simple deck that rewards you as you continue to play, and you can stylize it however you want as you go. So that is kind of important for deck building, and I do think it's a great expression for you guys who do enjoy deck building. But that's where I'm going to end it today. I do want to thank you because I've had a lot of fun playing Pure K9. I'm going to continue to play it, obviously, for the format and going forward. I do eventually will play Crystron K9 because I do want to try it out, because I did get the K9 engine sort of for Crystron because I did want to try it out, and I know that version is extremely powerful. But the point is, Pure K9 has been a blast, and I do hope you try it out because, like I said, the Pure decks out of this format are not bad. Everyone's splashing whatever they want with the decks, but I am telling you, Pure might be the way to go. But, like I said, that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, this has been Brad from the Ad Army signing off, and for all of you out there, to sign on.